This is our QR code, our website, LinkedIn, our email. Get in touch with us. We like to hear about your feedback. This information has all of our events that are upcoming. You can always find them and register for them on our website. So jump on in. We'll give some committee updates. We've been having a lot of fun this year, especially as committees. So we'll share what's going on. Communications. Maria Elena, would you like to just give an update?
Sure. I'm going to go through the notes that we talked about, things that we did on Friday. So from what I recall, as far as the website goes, CJ and Russ are still looking for a way to upload our videos from these meetings. So we're going to make some headway in that. Hopefully make it more accessible to folks who are looking to participate, even though they couldn't make the meetings. So that's going to be great. As far as the social media aspect, Ruby and I have got that, and we are hoping to reinvigorate our presence on other social media sites besides LinkedIn, because Russell has pretty much owned that one. But looking at Instagram, that's another one that we figured would be a good investment as far as capping both, like just essentially folks who may be interested but aren't directly involved in a safety industry quite yet. And then engaging with LinkedIn, as Russ has been, and maybe a little bit more too, just to increase our presence and to showcase some of the things that we're doing. So I think we're doing a lot of really good things. Same thing with highlighting any kind of updates. We're going to try to integrate these meetings, the president's message, with our social media, and just again be much more interactive and engaging that way. Trying to give ourselves a rhythm so that we're not basically investing in the wrong places or spending unnecessary time on it. So trying to streamline that process so that we can provide quality engagement and not inundate anything with frivolity, let's say. Okay, looking to streamline the messages using different programs like Canva to make sure that we've got templates to make it a little bit simpler to send out these messages and take up a little bit less time, less space, make it more reproducible so that we can, as we grow as a committee, we can start to share these tasks among ourselves so there is no single point of failure, and we can distribute to different folks and maybe give other people opportunities to participate too. And Ruby's really got a hold of the monthly newsletter much better than I ever could, but another one of those things that we're working to ensure is easy. And Russ did a great job of creating videos on how to utilize these different platforms too, so that we have training built in and make it a little bit simpler, easier for us to be able to train you folks up on it.
Yeah, thanks, Maria Elena. As she mentioned, there's a lot of simple bite-sized tasks that we've created and have tasked. So if you're looking for a simple way to jump in and help out the chapter, this is an easy community to get involved with. Even me personally have updated the website a couple of times without breaking the internet. So if I could do it, I promise you could do it.
Right, and the idea is to make everything feed back into the website and LinkedIn so that we can formally or better capture, give more in-depth information. So one little request, I'm not sure if this is the right place to do it, but I would really like some ideas on other accounts to follow. LinkedIn is pretty fleshed out, that's pretty complete, but I'm looking for any other kinds of safety adjacent Instagram accounts and different things like that to help round out the Instagram page, that presence. And also hashtags, as silly as they were to begin with, are actually kind of important now to feed your information to different people on different sites. So I've got a list of those, but I would really welcome other ones as well. So Instagram accounts, LinkedIn accounts, hashtags, and we are not really engaging in Twitter or Threads, but let me know if that's something that you're interested in doing. As a committee decided to invest in LinkedIn and Instagram mostly.
Yeah, and I'd like to make just a small ask of everybody on this meeting. If you do have any social media accounts, whether that's Instagram or LinkedIn, just find a recent one of our posts, make a comment, like it. Your engagement helps our profile and celebrating what we do as a chapter. So,
All right, I'll put our Instagram account on the chat as soon as I find that. Here we go. Okay. I still haven't had breakfast, so I apologize for the stammering. I'm hungry.
thank you, Maria, Alina.
You're welcome.
All right, next is the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee is helping out reviewing the Treasurer's monthly report. Christy Rep is our treasurer. She keeps track of all of our purchases and expenses, and we also, as a committee, will look after and try and get meeting and event sponsors. Tim's been a great help for us with that endeavor. And because of that, we've been very successful getting all of our meetings sponsored this year. It's also created the need to create invoices and receipts and track all that information. Tim, if you're on the call, you're welcome to comment as well.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, no, great. I appreciate everybody that has helped us out with the sponsorship. And well, thank you, everybody, if you're on the line, and also all future sponsorships that help us out also. So I appreciate it. We all do. ASSP does. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, this is a great opportunity at a very low cost to just get some exposure for your company. So reach out to Tim or I if you're interested in sponsoring anything. Next is membership. Russ, I don't know if you want to mention anything, but our membership committee is another fun committee that we created a couple years ago, and our focus is to just engage all of our members and give everyone different opportunities to participate. One of the things that we learned through the Spring Rock last year, and we kind of mentioned in some of the newsletters, is that membership looks different for everybody. Some of us like to join the chapter meetings, some like to go to the social events, read the newsletters. So this committee is always looking for different opportunities, looking to highlight member accomplishments and set up everything else as far as tours and networking mixers. Russell, you want to say a few words?
I think that's a really good summary. Membership is a really exciting place to get plugged in as well. It's just like the committee meetings are just really fun, sometimes kind of goofy, but it's still within an hour, so it's respectful of everybody's time. But it's a really fun group, and it is focused on making sure that we're able to provide member value outside of these monthly technical meetings. And so one of the things that I was talking about before the meeting started is our upcoming site tour. Darren Dorton is here, and he's the safety manager at FedEx's Henderson ground facility. He's going to show us what they do to keep their folks safe. That's coming up a couple weeks around the corner, but things like that are exactly what our membership committee sets up. It's just a great group of folks. It's easy to jump on. It's 1 hour. Tomorrow, it's always the Wednesday after the chapter meeting online, and there's more info on that on our chapter website. Thanks,
Russell. And I also want to acknowledge Lisa Buck, who is the committee chair, and Britt Brothers, who is the board liaison for the committee. They have difficulty making the chapter meetings, but they're very involved with membership and help keep us focused on providing that member engagement and opportunities. So thanks to them for their hard work. And then a little WISE update. Suzanne won't be able to see this slide because I think she's on the phone, but I got a photo of our new WISE logo and t-shirt that she's making, which will be available to purchase soon, $25. Suzanne, want to give us a quick update on WISE?
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, we're driving up into town. Yeah, I'm gonna be getting those t-shirts. I got those t-shirts in order. They should be hopefully ready within the week. I don't know exactly the lead time on that. I'm gonna call them this morning and verify. Yeah, we're gonna do the in-person on the 15th of November at home base. I think from 5 to 6, I believe. And yeah, I'm hoping we can get people to come and just to say hi and network for about an hour, and then get some ideas for moving forward. I'm really excited about this. You know, if it starts out small, it can turn out large. So I'm really excited about getting this rolling. So thanks, Ben, for all your support as well. And Russell.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks for your commitment to the WISE in this chapter. I know it's growing quickly, and it's going to be a great asset for our chapter and everybody in Southern Nevada. WISE is a really big deal throughout society, and it's been too long since we've had an active chapter for WISE. So thank you for your work.
That's awesome. May I ask, I'm sorry to interrupt, Suzanne, I know you're on the phone. May I ask you to send me some information on this so I can post on it before, just to,
Sure.
for the meeting, and then the t-shirts, are you planning on selling them online as well or just in person?
Probably just in person. I'm gonna bring a sample to the meeting on the 15th. I'm gonna bring up one t-shirt that I had made, and then like I said, I have the others in process. But yeah, we can, you know, I can order them online, or we can, you know, we have, I think we're ordering, I think 30 or so of those. So we have it, we can get them out. I've got them in size. I'm gonna order them in sizes extra large, and 2X. You know, most of us aren't little people, so if we need to order small sizes, we can. But I've got a good guy here in Bullhead, Arizona that did it.
Awesome. Okay, I'll just look forward to the information, and I'll take
Yes.
follow your lead on when to post it and when they're ready to sell. Thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome.
All right, that's exciting. All right, as Russell mentioned, here's the information for the tour. It's from 4:30 to 6 p.m. November 1st, FedEx Ground, thanks to Darren. And then whether or not you can make that tour, we'd hope to see you at the networking mixer to follow. It's going to be right down the street at Las Vegas Boulevard and Volunteer at the Parkway Tavern Volunteer location, 6 p.m. and just kind of hang out and just socialize, network, and just grow as a community. So I hope you all could attend that. It's always a lot of fun. All right, so a little more acknowledgement. We mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, but for those that jumped in a little bit late, Russell and some co-authors wrote an excellent peer-reviewed journal that is the cover feature story this month at the PSJ. It's titled A Fall Prevention and Protection Paradigm Shift. I got a QR code here if you want to link directly to it to your phone. Excellent read. Russell, I don't know if you want to mention any further about it, but mark this on your calendars. The May chapter meeting of 2024, Russell is going to be presenting his findings on this topic. So this is really excellent that we're able to spread this information to our chapter. And I'll also put a direct link in the chat here in a little while of that link too. All right, next I'd like to introduce Denise Fletcher with Live Electric. She is our meeting sponsor. This QR code goes to her website. We're very appreciative of her sponsoring this meeting. Denise, you have a few words you'd like to say?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. I just want to let you guys know Live Electric was really happy to sponsor this, and I'm really excited to be part of this community. I'm about almost 4 years into my safety career, and I just feel like I've learned so much, even more being part of this association. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Denise. That means a lot. All right, we're going to introduce Howard Herndon, our speaker today, to talk about the electrical safety.
So I'm glad you guys are all here. We are really lucky to have Howard right here in our backyard. A little bit of background for you. He's currently the president of his Nevada business, Electrical Professional Consultants. He's been involved for just about 20 years in the Southern Nevada chapter of a trade organization called the International Association of Electrical Inspectors. So we have some 20-year Southern Nevada ASSP members here. We're hearing from a senior guy like that on the electrical side in Howard. He serves on the Southern Nevada Electrical Code Committee as well, and that's a really fantastic way for him to make sure that that he's working with the state, city, and county officials. They promote the qualification standards for local electrical safety professionals. He's got involvement everywhere. His business does training, his business does consulting, his volunteer work helps elevate safe work practices. We're just so fortunate to have Howard able to spend some time with us this morning. The other thing that I think is awesome, he's also the founder and principal facilitator for Western Adventure Expeditions. So if you want to go explore some unknown corner of the desert and be away from electricity, Howard's your man. Anyway, so from me to you, Howard, thank you so much for being here. And we are really excited to learn from you on your domain of expertise this morning.
Well, thank you, Russell. And I appreciate the shameless plug on my Western expedition. One of my loves in life is to not only teach electrical safety, but also to get out away from people and take. I do a lot of photography and a lot of exploring, so that's one of my main objectives. Bear with me just a second here. I am trying to get to the right screen and get set up here. And I've never used the Google Meets function, so I'm just being able to start work with it. So, couple of quick announcements. I have an 8-hour electrical safety training coming up November 1. And if that's something that you'd be interested in attending, you can go to electricalsafetypro.org. I actually have 2 separate companies. One of them is called Electrical Professional Consultants, and the other one is Electrical Safety Professionals. Yes, they're very similar name, but 2 different functions. Electrical Safety Professionals is the organization that manages the electrical qualification cards for the state of Nevada, both north and south. That's the card that replaced the Clark County card for electrical professionals. That's your journeyman's license. And I would encourage you as safety professionals that if you've got input into the people that you put on a job site or that you hire, is to ask for that qualifications card. What does that qualifications card mean? That means that they have gone through the basic apprenticeship program of either a union or non-union shop. They have a minimum of hours in. They have passed an electrical exam that has been put out by the International Code Council. And that every 4 years every 3 years, they have kept that license up, because it expires every 3 years, and every 3 years they have to have continuing education credits. One of the items that they have to have is a minimum of 4 hours of electrical safety training. So we try to encourage companies and safety professionals like yourselves to make sure that we're hiring good, competent people. You know as well as I do, the biggest way we can affect safety in general is making sure that we have properly trained people. And we have, and obviously electrical's been around for many years, and it's, we have a lot of people that don't necessarily use the best safety practices that they could be. And that's what our objective is trying to make sure that we're using appropriate safety practices. And that qualifications card is at least one of those steps in that process of making sure I've got qualified people. The other thing, Electrical Safety Professionals puts together with the International Code Council a program called EduCode. And this EduCode program every year covers 5 days of in-person training and 4 days of virtual training. And you can get some more information on that by going to our safety website too, and that's electricalsafetypro.org. So there's a couple of little shameless plugs for some upcoming training and being able to get more acquainted and more familiar with the electrical safety arena, as well as some electrical training. So give you a little background on me. I mean, Russell mentioned most of it, so I'm not going to do too much here, but I've been in the electrical business for over 40 years and had been in many different aspects of it, including working for major manufacturers like Westinghouse when there was a Westinghouse and Square D, and being in my own business for many years. So I've got quite a diverse background, as well as what Russell mentioned about being in the International Association of Electrical Inspectors Association as well. So we're going to look at several things today. Here's our objectives for the day. Sparky and I, which is my gentleman behind me, is going to, we're going to take a look at the guidelines of electrical standards, risk management, responsibilities, job safety planning. And this is probably the biggest area I think we can really affect, especially electrical safety. And as you would probably agree, most safety programs, by doing some planning. And then also look at some training requirements. Of course, our objective for electrical safety is, I look at it as a threefold objective. We have 3 different major documents. They are all managed by NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. Those 3 documents include the National Electric Code, or the NEC as we know it, which is actually NFPA 70. So that gives us the basis for a safe work environment, safe work facilities, safe installation requirements. That will give us, you know, how many amps I can put on a conductor, how many conductors I can put in a piece of conduit, how long that conduit run can be before it has to have a junction box in it, and those type of basic installation principles. If I look at the requirements of NFPA 70E, incidentally, all 3 of these documents are all on a 3-year cycle. So we are just getting into the 2024 70E requirements, and there wasn't a lot of changes from the 2021, but we have a 3-year cycle on all 3 of these documents, and they're all 3 offset by 3 years. So NFPA 70E does not contain any installation requirements, but has to do with the electrical safety guidelines when working on or near energized equipment. Now, these could be the simple guidelines of working on something energized, de-energizing a system maybe, or as simple as resetting a circuit breaker that is tripped. Then NFPA 70B, probably one of the least known standards, has the guidelines for maintenance of equipment. And just like our other industry-related safety equipment and many of our industry-related apparatuses as well as machinery that we use, maintenance is a huge part of that safety aspect. Because if I've got a safe system to work with and a safe piece of equipment, I'm in a huge step forward in creating a safe work environment. So I look at all three of these standards as kind of like the basis for electrical safety. If it's installed correctly, if it's maintained correctly, then it comes a long ways into being a electrically safe condition that I can work on. And by the way, if you've got questions, we're monitoring the questions, and then you can we can butt in and try to get some of those questions answered too. Or we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So that might be the best way to handle it, is just to wait till we get to the end, maybe scratch a question down on a piece of paper, and we'll get to the end and we'll try to review the questions that we have. So as we look at a qualified individual or a qualified person as the 70E, and these references that I have on my slides are all NFPA 70E. So if I look at the definition, Article 100 has definitions on it, and I've got a couple of definitions. We're not going to go through very many. But a qualified person has demonstrated skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations. So not only do they have to understand basic electricity, basic electrical principles, they have to understand the construction of that system. And, you know, office buildings are built one way, an industrial facility is built another way. You mentioned you're going to FedEx, that's built a totally different way. So many of our facilities look different. Yes, they all operate on electricity. And it's like saying a forklift is a forklift is a forklift. That's not necessarily true. There are stand-up forklifts, there are sit-down forklifts, there are, you know, all different flavors of forklifts, all the way, you know, into large boom trucks. So we have to make sure that we're qualified in what we're doing. Just like I wouldn't take a residential guy or a residential electrician and put them in the environment of working on a industrial facility such as a FedEx, or take him out to a mine site. So understanding the construction and operation of the equipment for that installation is part of a qualified person. So there's two steps to that. As well is we've received some safety training. And as we all know, as you go into different environments, you have different hazards and risks involved. So I need to be able to identify those hazards and risk, and I need to know how to reduce those associated risks. So having qualified people is a real key piece to electrical safety. The other definitions I want to look at are the definition of risk. Now, we make risk every day in our lives. We get in our car, we have I'm sure we don't sit down and write a risk assessment the minute we get into our vehicle, but many of those things go through our mind. And usually when they're not going through our mind, that's the time we're most at risk of having an accident. But a risk definition is a combination of likelihood of occurrence of injury and the severity of injury that results from the hazard. So what do we do when we do a risk assessment? It's a process that identifies the hazards, eliminates the likelihood of occurrence, estimates the severity of injury, and determines what protective measures are required in that situation. Something that I think we try to teach from my perspective, and I'm sure from your perspective, we try to teach the people that we work with every day, is to sit back, look at the situation, and let's assess the risk. As we manage those risks, Article 105 of 70E has some safety related work practices. And many of these safety related work practices are intended to provide the employee a process in which we can avoid those electrical hazards in the workplace. So having safety related work practices and procedures is definitely something that we want to make sure that we have in our managing of risk procedures. The electrical safety program is the responsibility of the employer, and the employers to have written safety related work practices and procedures. And it's up to the employer to implement these practices, to train our people on those practices. It's up to us as an employer to provide that training. But just like OSHA tells us, it's up to our employees to comply with those. But it's also up to us, a bullet point that's not there, is it's up to us to enforce them. And I mean, that's what you guys are all about, is not only creating programs, but also making sure that those programs are followed through and those programs are implemented into their everyday life as far as their work life and work career. One of the major electrical safety program priorities is to eliminate the hazard. And as you know from many of our other safety aspects, is we have to eliminate the hazard. Within electricity, the best way to eliminate the hazard is to create an electrically safe work condition, a basic lockout tagout. For instance, we got a safety switch here, and we've got a lock and a tag on it. So establishing that electrically safe work condition is awfully important. One of the priorities I think that people fail to realize is, for instance, this safety switch here is, okay, I've opened it, I'm going to change fuses in it, but are there other risks and hazards associated with that? And sure there are. Most likely the line side of that switch is still energized. So now I have created myself an electrical hazard that I need to go upstream of this device and do an appropriate lockout tagout. Because if I'm going to change fuses in this device, I'm going to be creating a situation where I have exposure to an electrical hazard. I have people all the time tell me, well, for instance, we won't go and get a Nevada Energy outage because of all the hassle it takes to get it. We'll just shut the main off. Well, what keeps someone away from hitting or touching or being exposed to the line side of that main circuit breaker? Well, if there's barriers in there, which some equipment, there are barriers in there, and this has going back to knowing the equipment. If there are barriers in there, then we can probably safely do that. But that takes a real risk assessment to figure that out. We've got a job that I'm working with a consulting engineer and electrical contractor on at the Clark County courthouse with some HVAC equipment change out. And if you know a little bit about safety requirements for electrical, this piece of equipment had about 75 calories of energy at it. 75 calories, we typically say, even if you have PPE on, it's if something happens, that PPE is nothing but a body bag for the coroner to pick you up in. Typically over 40 calories, we would not allow someone to be able to work around that piece of equipment. But the contractor was real insistent that we try just to turn the main off. And I said, no, we cannot do that. And with after convincing the contractor that that was not the way to go, and because of the owner's critical schedule, we had to make some real pleas with Nevada Energy to get it shut down. So it is extremely important that we look at what the priorities are for protecting the safety of the worker. And how do we manage that risk from a planning program? Is we have a planning phase. We have a doing phase. I often say the do phase is getting everybody's head together. That's the getting everybody's head together, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure we've back checked everything. You know, with electricity, like with many of our other energies that we have in our building systems, oftentimes there can be back feeds and other pieces of equipment in there that we don't realize could re-energize a system or repower a system. So we have that, hey, let's get all our heads together and make sure we understand that. We have the, okay, we're going to get the work done. We're going to make sure that we have gone through our heads together. We've checked everything out, and we're going to get the process done. And then we look at, okay, was it successful? And I think it's important to also, when we get down to these programs and have a written plan for whatever project we're doing, that we look at the results from that. What could we have done differently? And I'm sure you, as well as I, have gone to those situations where we've said, wow, that plan did not work out well. How can we change it the next time so we don't reuse a bad plan? So part of our electrical safety program is also to make sure that that we verify that newly installed and modified equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with applicable installation codes prior to being placed in service. Part of this is our responsibility. I've worked in a lot of high priority data centers in hospitals and banking facilities. We often will have checklists. I think a checklist is awfully important if you use it. If you're using a checklist, it's going to say, hey, did I properly install the bolts? Did I put the right bolts in? Did I properly torque those connections? Did I properly do my settings? Are things done properly? So many times we open pieces of equipment, whether it's electrical or not, and say, wow, I'm surprised this piece of equipment has stayed together under these circumstances because somebody's forgotten bolts, or maybe they're loose, or maybe they weren't properly maintained. But this is not only for the electrical inspector, and as you know, we have a major gap in our industries right now because of the authorities having jurisdiction have a very much a shortage of qualified individuals, and many times we have maybe a structural guy looking at electrical or a plumbing guy looking at electrical or vice versa. We need to make sure that our supervisors, our foremen, our superintendents are also taking the time to spend a few minutes making sure the installation is done correctly. Because there's nothing worse than turning something on and having it blow up, or having it blow up down the road and trying to explain what happened and why somebody got injured. So the first thing to do is install it correctly. Just threw a couple pictures up here. The first two are pretty good installations, the first top two. And you can see down here at the bottom on the left-hand corner, oh man, they might have done a fairly decent job of installing the pipe, but they forgot the supports for the pipe. And then they created a hazard by cutting holes in the electrical room, which has to have a 2-hour fire rating in it, and not refilling those holes. And the little one here with the blue box is somebody just didn't flat pay attention to what they're doing and didn't finish the job properly. The one all the way on the right is, well, I don't have enough circuit breakers in this piece of equipment, so I'm going to do what we might call is a tap. This is an illegal tap. It's not approved by the National Electric Code and the procedures they use. Yes, it looks nice and clean, but I do not have any protection on those conductors that are leaving that panel board. So there are code requirements around those. There are industry requirements that surround those type of taps. And that one was not done to the best of its ability, that's for sure. So making sure we install stuff correctly. There's so many times that I'm going to use the term half-ass stuff that we do. We'll just do it temporarily this time. Then I'll come back and fix it tomorrow. And then we all know that temporarily becomes temporarily permanent. And somebody else finds it. And many times those are hazards that are left for other workers to find. And they may not be the safest way to approach that. Condition of maintenance should also be considered in our electrical safety program. This was a piece, this picture here was a piece of equipment in one of our major hotels where an electrical contractor had shoved a metal fish tape into a pipe, and that metal fish tape had wound around there and caused an arc flash event. And you can see from the bussing there, those are 3 pieces of electrical bussing. It's aluminum bussing. That aluminum bussing melts at about 1250 degrees. And you can see droplets that have dropped down on those conductors. Now, those conductors are not naturally smoky. They just have gone through an arc flash event. And the outside of this enclosure was perfectly clean. The equipment was only about less than 5 years old. And we opened the cover doing an infrared scan and found this inside there. This is one of those hazards that was left for somebody else to find. And after much researching by the facility manager as well as as ourselves, we found that an electrical contractor had put a fish tape into this piece of equipment and caused an arc flash event. So can this be a problem? Sure it can. If I was to move those conductors, the insulation on those conductors would probably crack and fall off, thus creating another hazard. When we have an arc flash event like this, we have carbon that's put out by the flash that's in the equipment, and that carbon is not an insulator. It's a conductor. So consequently, we have compromised insulation, and in electrical arenas, that is a huge, huge issue. So condition of maintenance should be considered. Just like when we have a facility and let's say the main breaker or many of the other breakers have not been turned off in many years. Like many of our other pieces of equipment in our industries, the equipment, whether it's a valve or a circuit breaker, has to be exercised to the point that it can properly operate. Grease has to be moved around so that those hinge points can operate properly and the overcurrent device can operate. And when they don't, you have circumstances where you try to move the handle from on to off, and it won't move. Or the handle moves, but the mechanism inside doesn't. Or we turn the overcurrent device off or circuit breaker off, and then it won't go back on. So the condition of maintenance is a huge consideration in our electrical safety program. Another one of the things that we look at in our electrical safety program is awareness and self-discipline. I mean, self-discipline sometimes is with some people, it's common sense. Other people, it's not so common. So we have to make sure that our people recognize the hazards and have the self-discipline not to do stuff that they shouldn't be doing. For instance, if you were going to put a new set of conductors in an existing pipe, I want that panel to be de-energized. I don't want the old principles of, oh, we'll put some cardboard in there to kind of block you from getting into those energized parts. We want to have that piece of equipment, the self-discipline for somebody to say, no, this equipment has to be de-energized to do this. And I think that's a big fallacy we have in the electrical industry and many other areas and arenas of construction, is also maintaining equipment, is equipment can be shut down. We just have to find the right time. It may not be convenient to work on this piece of equipment at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, but maybe that's the time to do it. Maybe it's a casino and we have to work on it on a Tuesday night at 4 a.m. So there's many things that we can do. I have yet to find too many pieces of equipment that could never be shut down. And if there are, that's typically a design issue that has to be addressed. So the examples of some of the principles of electrical safety program is every hazard should be identified and minimized. Every job should be planned. First time procedures should be well documented on how we're going to do it. And consider the what ifs. I always say expect the unexpected. Expect the unexpected, because things are going to happen. And we need to know what those are, and then talk to our people about how we're going to react to those. Controls and procedures is another part of our electrical safety program that we have to have. Obviously a documented policy, because if it's not in writing, it never happened. Measurable controls. Our safety program should have measurable controls. It should include procedures to utilize before we start work, such as that hazard risk analysis, this type of documentation, and a procedure on how to create a hazard risk analysis. If there's specific equipment and specific circumstances that I need to look at, I need to make sure that I have well-documented procedures that have been reviewed with the owner and with the general contractor to make sure that we are following specific guidelines, such as if we're working on a piece of equipment that's affected by water or steam, I need to make sure I control those energies as before I go shut the power off and have bigger problems. I also should make sure when I'm working with electricity, what would happen if that did have to go off or did went off? You know, something happened and that power did go off. What is that affecting? In not too many years ago, we had a project at a hospital that we were working with an electrical contractor on, and we were called in as a consultant to be able to help with the safety portion of this. So we went through and analyzed the system, came up with arc flash values, came up with PPE values, inspected the system to make sure the equipment would properly fit. And our chore was to install a circuit breaker in a panel in a hospital that could not be de-energized. One of the questions that I failed to really look seriously at, and it came up in our conversations after I asked the hospital owner or hospital representative what this panel controlled. They told me, well, this controls the air supply for the neonatal infants. Now, I don't know about you, but my mind just immediately flashed dollar signs because of the fact that if something was to happen and that neonatal air supply was cut off because we had an arc flash event or something happened to that panel, what would the liability be? So I asked the hospital, I said, well, what are you going to do to back up if this panel was to go down? What are you going to do to back this up? Are you going to have portable air supplies that we could switch to? Do you have tanked oxygen? Do you have extra care folks on staff, such as nurses, assistants, to take care of this problem? And they're like, no, this is your problem, not mine. So oftentimes our customers that we deal with don't necessarily understand the process, because if something blows up, putting a breaker in a panel may be a 30-minute process, maybe an hour process. But if it blows up, the best thing I can probably hope for is a 4 to 8 hour shutdown to change that panel out and get them back online. And what are they going to do during that 4 to 8 hours? So having the controls and procedures and documented on the specific equipment and the circumstances is extremely important. If we look at the risk assessment procedures for electrical, we have the standard things like identifying the hazards, assessing the risk, implementing controls. But we have two major areas of risk as far as electrical is concerned, and one of them is shock, and one of them is arc flash. These two particular areas have charts that we can go to within the 70E documentation as far as the shock is concerned to get the appropriate PPE requirements, look at work practices, look at the boundaries that we need to keep qualified and unqualified people out of. That is all easily done through charts within 70E. The risk for arc flash is done by some very, very tough calculations that are typically done by computer. There are a couple of charts within the 70E book, but the problem with the charts is they have a lot of generalized requirements on it. And if we don't meet those generalized requirements, we can't use them. We have to actually go through the calculations. But we have to create boundaries where we want qualified and unqualified people within PPE and people that are not. We need to look at the level of PPE that's required and the work practices that are required within those. So these are areas, this risk assessment as far as the arc flash and the shock are concerned, are things that we need to look at when we're assessing that risk. So I made a general list of some risk assessment analysis. May include, do we have an accurate one line of the electrical system? Like many other industries, this is very, very difficult in a lot of facilities because we've had a lot of different remodels over the years. upgrades, downgrades, overgrades, maybe the building has changed its function, whatever the case might be. But having an accurate system, electrical one line, is a requirement of not only OSHA 70E, it is a requirement in order to be able to properly do a risk assessment. Some of the other considerations are, what's the age of the equipment? Is the equipment under normal operating conditions? And I say normal operating conditions, has it been properly maintained to the point that it is not in distress? Has the equipment been tested or inspected as of recent? Is the equipment damaged? Has the equipment been exposed to outside elements such as dust and grease and water and other things that might happen? Little things like, are all the bolt covers installed? Now, unless you're related to electrical equipment, most electrical covers, you may not know that most electrical covers have bolted covers on them. They could have anywhere between 6 and 15 bolts in them. And when they're tested at UL and tested at the factory conditions, what they try to test for is to make sure that those covers stay in place in case of an implosion inside that equipment. So if a cover is meant to have 12 screws in it and it only has 4 in it, what do you think is going to happen during an arc flash event within that equipment? Well, that cover is actually going to come out like a suicide sword, and blowing that cover off and hurling it at you. So we want to make sure that bolted covers are installed properly. One of the biggest impacts I see in the electrical industry we can make on this is not the use of impact guns. And everybody loves impact guns. You can covers, and then if we do strip them out, we have to fix them. We can't just leave the bolt sitting there. Use a nut clip, a nut insert, rethread it to the next size, whatever the case might be. We need to make sure that we fix it. Make sure the equipment is properly rated. Do the overcurrent devices work properly? Is there evidence of overheating or previous other arc flashes that have happened? So that may also be some of the things that we might look at in our safety assessment. Human error. Human error must be considered. What are the potentials for human error? I know as safety professionals, we can help identify human errors. Making sure people are well rested, make sure people have got the, so much of human error has to do with where we're at mentally. Having done a couple of post assessments on accidents that have happened, so much of human error has to do with where we're at in our head. And, life is complicated. Families are complicated nowadays. And a lot of times we just don't have our head in the work that we're doing. So we need to consider human error and make sure everybody is focused on their job. ID behaviors that could lead to causes of accidents or near misses too. This might be because we're working at 2 in the morning. This might be because I've already worked 60 hours this week. Lots of different things. Might be because I have stuff going on in my life. Maybe we've got partnership problems. Maybe we've got kid problems. Maybe we've got parent issues or whatever the case might be. But we need to put those aside so we can focus on making sure we can go home in the same condition we came to work. Some of the principles of human performance, Annex Q in 70E has a great outline of the principles of human performance. And as a safety organization, I'm sure you go over these on a regular basis. People make mistakes. Error-prone situations and conditions are predictable, manageable, or preventable. Performance is influenced by the organization and the values of the organization. As a owner of a company and a manager of a company, I learned very quickly, if you set the expectations that we're going to get stuff done or a project done in a timely manner, and didn't emphasize that safety is the huge part of that before that we get it done in a timely manner becomes the priority. So consequently, we as leaders play a huge influence in our people concerning this area of the influence and the values of the organization. Accidents can be avoided learning through mistakes and applying the lessons learned through past mistakes. As you are aware of, there's a hierarchy of control. This is covered in Annex F of NFPA 70E. And we're going to go over some of these really, really quickly, because many of these are in other industries similar, but we also want to share, hey, there's an electrical aspect to this as well. Elimination, if we eliminate the hazard, basic lockout tagout is one of the best methods of reducing their risk. But make sure when we eliminate what we think we eliminate the hazard, that we've actually eliminated the hazard and there's no hidden hazard there that we haven't taken a look at. Many of our electrical equipment manufacturers and others have come up with ways to substitute. If I can put a robot in front of a piece of equipment to push a button or to rack a circuit breaker in and out, I've eliminated the hazard that may be presented to the worker that's standing in front of that equipment. And in a lot of our equipment, especially what we refer to as low voltage draw out equipment, we have these type of apparatuses that are available to us. Yes, they're expensive, but as safety professionals, we know the ultimate cost of having somebody injured, the damage to their psychological areas and to their family and to you as a company if an accident does happen, and it makes the expense of that substitution look pretty cheap in the big picture. Engineering controls are great. It's ways to isolate the worker from that hazard, whether it's machine guards on mechanical equipment or whether it's interlocks or hand switches to keep people out of that danger zone. But this has to be something that the worker is, I won't say forced, but the worker is in compliance with. If I open a cabinet and it has a limit switch on it that shuts the power off, yeah, that's great to de-energize the system. But many times we find that those cabinets, that switch, that door switch or interlock gets wired closed, or maybe it's got some tape around it. Well, that doesn't do anything to help isolate the worker from the hazard. So making sure that is kept in good working order, number one. Number two, it's not bypassed, is an extreme situation where we want to make sure that things are done properly. Awareness, I mean, you can look at anything from YouTube to Instagram to the warning signs we have on our equipment. They're all good. But in my teaching, I ask people, I say, hey, these signs have been required on electrical equipment now for probably 20 years. Excuse me just a minute. So this type of signage has been required for a good 20 years. I said, how many of you have ever gone and looked at that last line? Refer to NFPA 70E. I've yet to find anybody that said, hey, you know what? Before I touch this equipment, I went out and got a 70E book and read what it had to say. So warning signs are great, but it's just like danger or caution tape on a job site. I often use as an example that warning tape means that I pick it up and keep walking. Danger tape means I pick it up, look both ways, and keep walking. Unless we enforce these as safety professionals, people do not respect them. And we also have to do the other side of the fence is when they're done with that project, we have to take those parameters down. Nothing worse than walking on a job site, seeing a caution tape or a danger tape and not seeing any imminent danger, and then not finding anybody around to say, hey, well, I need to go over to this other area and this is where I've got to cross. How do I get there? So I'm a big proponent of let's put a contact name, let's put a tag on that caution or safety tape that says, hey, this area is blocked off between these dates and these dates for these hours. And this is who put it up, and this is how you get a hold of them. Because I think that's awfully useful because hazards on job sites, a lot of people get into problems because, oh, I didn't realize, this is going on or that is going on, and got in over their heads because they passed under danger tape or caution tape and didn't realize what was going on there. Administrative controls are great. They are a form of managing our folks and managing our safety programs, but administrative controls are only as good as the people who are doing it. I was about 6 or 8 months ago, I was teaching a class, an open public class, and this class happened to be filled with the company owners, general foremen, and superintendents. And oftentimes in our classes, we take off on tangents a little bit, and we got to talk about managing people around the safety atmosphere, especially electrical safety. One of the comments that was made to me was, hey, I had this guy working for me. Man, every day at the end of the day, I got in my toolbox notes for my safety meeting for the morning, and everybody had signed off on it that they attended it. I had gotten all my job safety hazard analysis done. I get that at the end of the day. We thought this guy was doing a great job until one day he was sick, and the superintendent went out to fill in for his position for the day and realized that all this guy was doing was going home at night, filling in the blanks and then sending them off to the boss. That his people in the field was not having good quality safety meetings, was not using proper procedures and policies, he was following the procedure to check a box. And I think that's the difference between what we've got to impart to our people is we need to make sure we're just not checking boxes. When we check boxes, we're going to be bound for a problem. And yeah, it may look good on paper, but in reality, when OSHA interviews the people involved, they're going to say, well, I never signed that. I never went to that meeting. We never had those meetings. So consequently, it brings up a lot of questions as to what's going on. PPE, another aspect, whether it's harnesses or electrical PPE, we use that to help control risk, but realize that PPE is the last line of defense. Creating a safe work environment is priority number one. And that may include PPE, but PPE doesn't do anything to really make sure that we're following safe work practices. It's there just in case there's a problem. It's a last line of defense to reduce that hazard. There's also a lot of electrical workers that think, well, I'll just get in my PPE and that somehow makes me Superman, puts a S on my chest and allows me to get my work done that you need done, whether it's installing a breaker in a energized panel or doing something that's a little bit risky. So error precursors, we talked about this briefly earlier. Error precursors for human performance could involve task demands, work environment. Maybe it's a noisy environment. Maybe it's summer times are brutal to try to be in appropriate PPE and work. Individual capabilities. There's a lot of people who may not be in a good position to fulfill a task that needs to be done. Maybe it's in their head. Maybe it's that they're just not their personality. And then, of course, human nature. So error precursors, those are the 4 groups of error precursors that we can watch out for. So key preventer for all of this is planning step-by-step procedures. If you were with me doing a hospital or a data center or something, we would have a step-by-step procedure and put timetables to each of those procedures, making sure we go through those critical steps and we don't miss a critical step. It's the last thing we want to do is get a critical step put together and somebody say, well, what did this bolt go to? Why do we have an extra bolt? Or where's my crescent wrench? And in electrical terms, that can really be create a risky environment. So these are some of the key preventers as far as communications is concerned. Make sure that we stop and review situations when there's questions, communication, have contingencies, those type of things are critical to that planning process. I think we probably all know these. Just a quick reminder, make sure we have qualified people doing that job safety planning. It must be documented. That can't be just, between two guys, 2 people trying to put a job safety plan together. Description of the task, the hazards involved, making sure we have our risk assessment as far as shock and arc flash are concerned, what the procedures are, and what are we going to do if, making sure everybody's on the same page, and what are we going to do if there is a change of scope when we get into this thing. So again, the procedures are written documentation is required. Make sure we look at what kind of system, what kind of procedures going to be used, what's the PPE requirements, what are the test instruments required, what are the lockout tagout requirements. There's a lot of different lockout tagout attachments. We need to make sure we have the appropriate one for that device. Review the process with all. As far as electrical safety program and training is concerned, there are different training requirements. The basic requirements is to have a classroom training. It can be on the job training. And of course, if we do OJT, we want to make sure that it's well documented what we talked about and the things that were covered in the OJT. Emergency response training. This is a requirement of NFPA 70E that there be a training annually on removing victims from a contact or a shock situation, how to release a victim from shock. That's one thing we do cover in our class. It's a relatively simple concept, but it needs to be gone over so that it's rehearsed so it can be second nature if something does happen. First aid, CPR, AED is training that's required in accordance with the certifying bodies such as American Red Cross or whoever you happen to be using for that. Some of the qualifications of a qualified personnel, identify, electrical hazards, training to deal with those hazards, determine the equipment condition, knowing the difference between, no, this is not a good piece of equipment for us to be working on, or it is a good piece of equipment to be working on. Knowledge of the equipment and the system, that planning piece of the puzzle as far as risk controls and PPE and boundaries are concerned, lockout, tag out, what type of equipment am I going to be using to determine voltage, and retraining required not to exceed 3 years. So we have two different areas in the electrical safety program that we look at the responsibilities. We have the host employer and we have the contract employer. Now, the host employer may be a facility. We'll just use FedEx for an example, that invited you as a contractor in to do some work. Obviously, there's all the pricing procedures and all of the other things that go along with it, but their responsibility is to inform you of known hazards. From an electrical perspective, we're going to look at a single line diagram of the electrical system, an arc flash study, information about the equipment, any kind of testing reports. Their responsibility is to also inform you as a safety professional that if there's violations that your people have made on site. Meetings should be documented. I think this is all great just to send over in an email. I think it's great if you send it over to email for review and then sit down and review the documentation. Yes, it's another meeting, but it's another meeting that is actually, we're reviewing what the situations are. This keeps, oh, you shut the wrong valve off. You shut the wrong breaker off. Well, that wasn't clearly marked. You can discuss those things in that meeting as well. Make sure that is a documented meeting, because we all know that if it's not documented, it never happened in a court of law. Contract employer. This is maybe the electrical contractor or other contractor that's going to work in the facilities. Make sure we've taken those hazards we've learned from that meeting that we had and put those to our people. It's no good for us to have them in our head if we're not letting our people know what's going on. Make sure our employees are using good, safe work practices in accordance with those hazards. Make sure that we document hazards that we, as a guest worker, a contract worker within that facility, were presented with. If we opened a junction box and all the wires popped out at us, and now we have maybe wire nuts that have popped off, I want to take some pictures of that and make sure that we inform the owner of that facility that, hey, there's a problem here. If we had a breaker that wouldn't shut off, or it shut off and wouldn't go back on, I want to make sure that we have documentation that shows that. Electrical safety is a shared responsibility between customers, employers, and obviously employees. Effective communication is essential. Documented meetings with facilities and contractors working in facilities avoids those disconnects that often happen. We have a shared responsibility. As an employers, we have responsible to our employees. We produce programs to help eliminate risk. We provide PPE. We provide the equipment that they need, including training. Employees have responsibility themselves. Obviously, if you got into electrical or many other trade areas, you know that there is dangers within those trade positions and trade jobs. Employees have responsibility to their families. Your family expects that you know the safety rules. And an employee has a responsibility back to their employer, the organization that's writing that paycheck every week or however you may be paid. Test equipment is another area that we can greatly affect. Making sure, and this is at a challenge sometimes with union organizations because of the amount of tools that we as an employer have to provide versus what the employee provides, but making sure our people are using appropriate test equipment to make sure things are de-energized. Some of the areas that we can mainly affect is making sure they're properly rated, they're designed for the environment, they're in good repair, making sure we're using good, safe work practices as testing on a known voltage source with your voltage detection device or meter, test the equipment where the voltage is to be detected, and then go back to that known voltage source. And that'll make sure our equipment is properly working. So last of all, this is a accident that happened, a picture of an accident that happened within a facility. It happened to be a state facility. It's Lovelock State Prison. And I'll give you a little background on this and share some of the areas where we could possibly influence that safety arena. So this was a situation where an electrical contractor had been involved in installing a PV system or a solar system at this state facility at Lovelock State Prison. Lovelock, if you don't know where it's at, Lovelock is about an hour and a half's drive, about 90 miles outside due east, a little bit north, but more due east of Reno. The gentleman's job for the day was they were just got onto their year time when they were going to, fully turn the job over to the state, and they could then collect their retention. Their job was to make sure that the system was properly working. And we did that. That's done typically by a couple of measurements. The first one was to do an infrared scan of all the connection points within the electrical system. The second way was to measure both the DC output of the PV panels and then look at the combiner boxes as a group and see what it was actually outputting to the inverter. And then the inverter makes it from DC power to AC power so we can use it in our normal electrical systems. So if you've ever worked at a prison, you know that you're, even though you may be outside of the gate, you're being constantly monitored. I'm sure there was a lot of fatigue in continuously doing this process. Take the covers off, doing your checks, putting the covers back on. This gentleman had come to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He'd been doing the same process all day. And of course, if you've ever worked around a prison facility, you have to keep track of all your screwdrivers and all your test equipment, make sure you keep them all combined and you didn't lay a screwdriver down somewhere you didn't want to. But he got to this switch. Now, this switch is a what we call a 5 kV rated switch. It's 4,160 volt. He'd been using the same meter all day. That meter was rated at 1,000 volts maximum. And this gentleman, there was plenty of caution things on the outside of it. In fact, this gentleman had been involved in the installation of this system. One of the unique things about PV systems or photovoltaic systems is oftentimes on the utility tie-in switch, one of these sides of this switch is always energized. And there's no standard that says, hey, it's the load side of the switch or it's the line side of the switch. In this particular case, the gentleman open the door because there's not a interlock that you could defeat. Open the door, and you have to turn the switch off to open the door, and then he turned the switch back on. The cables on the bottom go out to the PV field. Once the AC power has been turned off, the inverters will de-energize because they no longer will, they're no longer tracking the 60 cycle sine wave. But he turned the switch back on, and as you can see on the right-hand side of that one fuse, you have a burnt spot, and on the center fuse, you have a burnt spot. The gentleman took a 1,000-volt meter and placed on a 4,160-volt system. Gentleman was not wearing any PPE. He did have a long-sleeve cotton T-shirt on, did have leather gloves on, safety glasses. He had a goatee before when he had started that morning. It basically burnt the goatee off. Left his long sleeve cotton T-shirt with holes that looked like he'd been welding in front, right directly in front of a piece of steel. So it had lots of holes in it. Gentleman was lucky he was alive. Blew up his instrument, immediately caused an arc flash, caused some damage to the equipment, as you can see. But investigating it, what really happened? And I had to go back to some of the, okay, what was going on with, the situation? Well, this was the last piece of equipment. I'm sure his thoughts were turning to the fact that maybe he was getting a call from his spouse saying, hey, by the way, Susie's got a soccer game. Make sure you're here at 5 o'clock for that soccer game. Or Bobby's got a little league game. Or maybe he was just trying to get home because he wanted to sit down and relax because he'd been out at the prison all day. But the basis for this, basis for what went on here was he just wasn't thinking. He took that same meter he had been using all day, which was totally appropriate, and put it into what we call a 5,000-volt system, and that could have killed him. And not only did that cost the state money because a company had to come in and repair this piece of equipment and do some further testing on it to make sure it was still in good shape. It also cost the contractor the ability to do work for the state of Nevada again, because the Public Works project manager removed that company from the approved list to do work for the state of Nevada. So I think it's important that we not only look at, yes, the safety of the personnel, making sure we're doing the right things, making sure we have a plan, making sure we got our head in the job, but also look at what are the ramifications if something goes wrong. And there's been many companies who, and as you guys well know as safety professionals, once we have an incident like this, it gets put on our OSHA record. It gets put on a watch list of sorts. Our insurance rates go sky high. It affects our ability to do business. And I think sometimes our people fail to think about this. When they make a mistake, it affects their livelihood, not only from us sustaining an injury, but also from us as an employer providing a paycheck for them, because now our insurance rates just went up 30% because we had could have been a small minor accident. It well could have been preventable, as this one could have been. There was no need for him to stick a meter in there. And if he was to stick a meter in there, he should have been sticking the correct meter in there. So I use this as an example of This gentleman just did not have his head in the job and what he was doing. And many times these can definitely affect our electrical safety and how we work and do our job. So those are the things I wanted to share with you today. I appreciate all your attention. If there are questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those questions. And Ben, I think we have any questions, Ben, that we were trying to field during that presentation?
We did have lots of comments in the chat, just mostly agreeing with a lot of what you said. And I really appreciate the education this morning. We will open up the room if people have questions. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. And then before anybody takes off too, there is a link for the post-meeting survey. I could throw up a QR code up here as well. But make sure you take that survey, get some feedback to the programs committee that put this on together today. And it's also necessary to claim your CEUs. So any Q&A, feel free to jump in.
Howard, what do you think about the merits of having of making sure that your maintenance professionals are able to kind of like pre-flight that warning label and perform that assessment before they even open the panel? How much administrative work needs to be done to confirm that opening the panel won't cause the arc event itself?
Well, I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of things that we can do sometimes. Most of the hazards I've seen by opening let's say a panel cover is due to hazards that have been left by other people previous to us. And I think it has to go back to what maintenance procedures have we used on a regular basis in order to have we'll call it inspection to make sure that it's appropriate. The challenge we have in the maintenance arena, especially in our town, is unless you're in an industrial facility, our hotel casino industry does not use maintenance procedures at all. It's like, are the lights on? Oh, then it's fine. It's a tough one. The labeling, and we didn't even actually go into that because of time, but there are additional labels that are required by NFPA 70E, and those give us our boundaries and our levels of risk involved, our calories per centimeter square as far as our arc flash is concerned on those labels. I think those labels are a huge part of making sure we at least take some type of step to make sure that our maintenance folks are protected. The one I mentioned about Clark County, I mean, it has a label on it. We did that study some 15 years ago, probably. I had a label of 74 calories. That's way too dangerous. You can get a 100-calorie suit, but the body won't withstand the blast that comes out of that type of situation. And it could be that the equipment is in perfectly fine condition, but what if I accidentally dropped a cover? What if I accidentally dropped a screw? We've had circumstances where we've pulled covers off and parts have fallen out on us. That can be a huge risk because you don't necessarily see what's behind the cover. So that answer your question or confirm your comment?
Absolutely, yeah. So knowing that condition of maintenance it has been intact, that goes a long way. But no, you're right. Most facilities, they have their engineering department or their handyman. God bless them. But if there's not a disciplined condition of maintenance program, sometimes it's kind of a crapshoot what you're gonna find.
And that's exactly right. We've actually, locally, we've tried to implement with the operators union a program. They have done really well with the hotel facilities to implement licensing procedures, especially for electrical. But my challenge with that is a lot of these people can pass tests, but don't necessarily think about the practical side when they do it. I always want to make sure before I pull a cover that I've analyzed the risk and put on a practical set of PPE to allow me to get that job done, which typically is going to include some type of ARC-rated clothing or FR-rated clothing. So I've got at least something on to help protect me. Sure. And then I've got the cover off. Then I can, if it wasn't marked on the enclosure, I could make it some type of assessment and say, okay, this is.
Then you can be sure that you've got an electrically safe work condition once you're able to actually examine what's behind the cover.
Exactly. Yeah, gray boxes are a fallacy that they're all safe.
Sure.
And I say gray boxes because most of our equipment's in gray boxes. Any other questions or comments?
Thanks for coming. It's been super informative, a great refresher.
I'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got on the side. I think my email was on part of the information. If not, here, I'll just do this. I'll throw my information up here. And then if you need to copy it down. The electrical training there's my H. Herndon at proec.biz is the electrical consulting. The qualifications program, I put a lot of, if you look at our electricalsafetypro.org, you'll find articles on there. You also find a lot of training opportunities as well. So those are the two ways you can contact me. My preferred way is H. Herndon at proec.biz, or there's my office number. I don't spend a lot of time in the office, but Mary Ann, who is my office administrator and director, she can always find me. She always knows where I'm at. So those are the ways you can get a hold of me. So thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's great being able to work with other safety professionals and share some of the areas that maybe you're not an expert in, but there's a lot of areas that I'm not an expert in as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. You covered quite a bit in 1 hour, so great job.
Yeah, I had to keep it rolling.
And thanks again